He took on the Celtics on Sunday, and it was everything you would expect from this intense rivalry. But Miami, without Jimmy Butler, Terry Rozier, or Josh Richardson, simply did not have enough to get the win. And yet, was it a good game for the Heat? A gritty, tough effort holding their own against the team with the league's best record. We break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me, as always, it's longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Recording this on a Sunday afternoon, right after the Heat lost to the Celtics, 110-106. No Jimmy Butler, who missed this game because of attending to a death in the family. The Heat lost Terry Rozier and Josh Richardson during this game. And yet, David, this was still a very intense game. It felt like a playoff game. And I know that the Heat are going to be mad about losing this one, but this was a much better showing than the last time the Celtics were in town just a couple of weeks ago, right?
Absolutely. I'm not a big believer in moral victories, but I think if Miami can take any solace from today's game, it's that they actually did get the quote-unquote moral victory. I think the tenacity they showed, the fact that they stayed together despite the losses and injury, to go into a matchup against the best team in the Eastern Conference, one of the best teams in the league, and you're already without your top player, your top scorer, the heart of your team in Jimmy Butler, and then to suffer a pretty bad injury with Josh Richardson, who had been playing some nice defense, and then to lose Terry Rozier to a strange injury there, I think early in the third quarter. Just Miami could have withered. They could have crumpled completely, and yet they did the exact opposite. They showed some incredible tenacity, real fight, real intensity there. They played really tough defense, seemed to motivate the crowd that had far too many Celtics cheers ringing down from it. And Miami played a style of basketball that we've slowly been seeing over the last 5 to 6 game stretch. They won 4 of their last 5 before today's matchup with Boston, a loss to the good Celtics. I'm sorry, the Clippers in that group, and now tonight to the Celtics. So I think overall the process shows that Miami is steadily getting better after that 7-game losing streak. And they showed a lot of heart, a lot of effort tonight. It was classic Heat basketball. And ultimately, though, without Jimmy Butler, without some of those other key players, they just couldn't get the win. But they did everything but. And I think you can still take some comfort in that.
We talked about going into this game how this was going to be a measuring stick, right? They got wiped off the floor last time Boston was in town a couple of weeks ago. That was not even a competitive game whatsoever. It was right in the midst of that 7-game losing streak. It just didn't seem like the Heat deserved to be on the same court as them then. That was not the case tonight. This was a measuring stick game. There's a lot of weird factors in this one. No Jimmy Butler was a big one. And if you told me, all right, no Jimmy Butler, the Celtics have their full health of players. Kristaps Porzingis is playing tonight, all this stuff. No Jimmy Butler. You're going to lose Terry Rozier halfway through the game. You're going to lose Josh Richardson during the game. Duncan Robinson's going to have his shoulder almost ripped out of from his body, and all those things. And this was still going to be a game within the last couple of minutes that I would have walked away and been like, wow, that's a pretty good result. If this was a measuring stick game, and let's go beyond the wins and the losses, because I hear you, and the Heat would agree with you. There was no such thing as a moral victory. I disagree. I think there are things that we can learn and take away and say, okay, the Heat deserved to be on the court with Boston. This had a playoff-like intensity. They stepped up to the plate. It was an ugly game. I don't know that anybody played particularly well on Miami, and they were still in it at the very end. And I don't know. To me, it is a moral victory. Like,
yeah, I mean, if somebody had said that, if somebody had said you're going to shoot 30%, lose 2 starters and a key role player against a healthy Celtics team and still lose by 4, I think everybody would have been shocked and surprised by that. So I think, again, the outcome is not what Miami wants, and yet
Sure.
you can enjoy the fruits of your labor and still say, you know what, we still showed enough. And rolling into the All-Star break, it's a good place for the team to be, I think. And now you've got a couple of games before the actual break itself, but I think overall you're starting to enjoy the process that you've seen building over the last handful of games.
They, like I said, the Heat would never say that there's such thing as a moral victory, but then you
No.
talk to them a few days later after that Clippers game, and they were kind of talking about that Clippers loss like a moral victory. Hey, we felt really good about those things. You can look back on those things and still, hey, we're playing good basketball. And in the regular season, in a make or miss league, and all the things that are part of that, with the injuries that Miami was dealing with, the wins and losses aren't always the most important thing. To me, it's okay. Zoom out. What is this team playing good basketball? They played good basketball today. It was ugly for stretches, but that was a well-played, intensely fought. They stepped up to the plate. They responded to the pressure. They took the best team in the NBA, a team with 12 losses all year long, and went toe-to-toe with them when they were healthy and Miami was not. And there was a lot of factors working against the Heat in this game that, quite frankly, just weren't working against the Boston Celtics. And that felt like why those teams don't like each other. And it felt like why those teams keep running into each other in the postseason. That's what that felt like. You get this right going into that All-Star break. I almost wish All-Star break. I wish that we could just keep playing the games, because I feel like the groove that the Heat are in now, there's a lot of reasons why they could use this All-Star break. We'll talk about Terry Rozier's injury here in a second, but this could be almost a turning point where it's like, okay, no, we missed this. Going. So look, I think that this was a big game for Miami, something that they could feel good about and something that they could build on. And again, I think this could end up being maybe a turning point. Almost like it was so intense, David. It was like it reminded me of the brawl in March a couple of years ago between Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra, like the near fight that they had. Sometimes this team is so sick. Like this whole organization is so sick sometimes that it takes like this kind of level of intensity to give this team that spark to kind of push them towards like a playoff, to fuel a playoff push. And I feel like this game could be that.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. Like, even from a personal standpoint, seeing Jaylen Brown's reaction to the Duncan Robinson incident, like I've started getting emotionally invested in the outcome of today's game. Like, I like Jaylen Brown just fine, although some of his off the court stuff is a little questionable. But I like him just fine as a player. But to see him kind of jawing at Duncan and to see Duncan respond, like Duncan wasn't doing anything. And for Jaylen Brown to be quote unquote frustrated and then lock up Duncan's arm and shove him to the ground like that, those were fighting actions there, you know. And so he got penalized with the flagrant one. It shouldn't have been a flagrant 2, but I can understand the ruling there. And then to see the team respond the way they did, I think that was providing a little bit of motivation. Although, you know, honestly, and I saw a lot of people tweeting about this, it would have been nice to have a Udonis Haslem type enforcer to just kind of say, you know what, we're not going to like that here. You know, we're not going to appreciate, we're not going to tolerate that here.
You know, wherever Udonis Haslem was like off his couch, ready, like punching his television. I don't like he was upset. We're going to hear something from Udonis Haslem over the next couple of days. Like on Instagram, even he might just post a photo of it and just be like, "Not in my house," or like whatever. I love Duncan Robinson getting fired up after that. I've never seen Duncan Robinson that angry about anything, and he did not let up. He did not let up. He just kept going at Jaylen Brown. I love that he stepped towards him. He said that basically, that's not a basketball play. That's not cool. We're not, you know, like, what are you doing? He was yelling at him. You know, his players came to his defense. Like they were kind of, you know, doing the hold me back thing that NBA players do.
Yeah,
but
should have been a fight.
Then it should have been a fight. And like, honestly, it's a good thing that Udonis Haslem wasn't there, because it would have been a fight. But I like that also and Jaylen Brown's ridiculous for even arguing that. Going to the ref and be like, why was it a flagrant? Like, dude, come on. That was obviously you're lucky it was only a flagrant 1. And then he's arguing with Duncan about it again, and Duncan's like, no, if you want to keep talking about it, we can keep talking about it. And they had to separate him again. It was great. And then the Heat respond with a 7-0 run and get back into the game with it. And that's why I keep coming back to this. I think the Celtics are so talented. Like I said, they're probably the best team in the NBA. They're the odds-on championship favorites. I would pick them. I'd probably still pick Denver, but whatever. I'm not going to, like, they deserve to be that. They are that talented. They've been that good all season long. But Miami is mentally tougher, and they have been over the last few years, and they are right now, because it felt like Boston was a little shaken after that. And look, they still won the game. Like, they won the game. They got the W. They walk away with the win. But they were a little shook after that. I thought.
Yeah, no, I think they were probably one Jimmy Butler and that crazy stretch that we see from him in the playoffs when these games mean so much to him away from getting a victory there, and then just kind of reminding Boston, I don't care what your record is, we're still gonna beat you. We're fine.
Yeah.
We're a better team than you are because we just live for these kinds of moments. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. But you know what? That's okay. Like it's gonna be I still want these teams to match up in the playoffs, and I still like Miami's chances because you know what? It's always going to be, they're always going to have that edge. They're always going to have that kind of crazy psycho mentality. And that's what makes this team so much fun to watch in the playoffs when the games count.
Duncan Robinson locking up Jaylen Brown, forcing him into a travel. I love that he got his revenge. It was great. Obviously everybody's rooting for this matchup. If you're a Celtics fan, maybe not. If you're a Heat fan, you absolutely are. If you're just a basketball fan, this
Absolutely.
is the series that you want at some point in the postseason in the Eastern Conference. But we do have other matters to attend to. What can the Heat do if Terry Rozier has to miss some time with a knee injury? We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for small businesses, you want to find quality professionals that are just right for the role. That's why you've got to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Listen, I've been there. I know what it's like to have to hire somebody. Not an easy process, a little too time consuming, and yet you want to find the right person. You want to dedicate some time to it. Well, LinkedIn just makes it easier for you to find those qualified candidates. They've got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. And LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you've got that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours, just one day. That makes things so much simpler. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing a lot of hats and might not have time or resources to find the right person to hire. And that's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. We're going to talk about Bam Adebayo's shot selection and some and potential free agents that the Miami Heat can pick up. Rozier has to miss some time. But before we get to that, let's just talk about the Terry Rozier injury. A lot of injuries in this game. None probably worse than Terry Rozier. Josh Richardson dislocated his shoulder and what was a scary kind of thing during that game. Caleb Martin seemed to have tweaked his ankle, although he stayed in the game. And then obviously we'll see if Duncan Robinson has any lingering issues with the shoulder. Even though he stayed in the game, he kind of was rubbing it and grabbing it basically for the rest of that fourth quarter after it had happened. But Terry Rozier did leave that game, hurt his knee on a drive in the third quarter. The Heat, Eric Spoelstra was asked by the broadcast. He called it an ankle. The Heat officially announced that it was a knee injury. We're going to get more information in the coming days. He's going to have an MRI. Josh Richardson is going to have an MRI. But David, what does this mean for the Heat if Rozier does have to miss a significant amount of time here?
You just got to find a way to retool around everybody else. Like you don't have any other options. Like we can't lead up to the All-Star break. And I think we saw Miami kind of respond and working their way through Tyler and finding his offense and getting into a groove late in the game, because that's what's going to be required of this team. Is going to be somebody has to step up, somebody who has the capacity to be a scorer and shooter, and that's where Tyler can make a difference. And I know a lot of those 3-point shots, look, he was putting them up from distance, like 28, 29 feet, maybe even further, because he just couldn't get past that initial point of attack defense from either Derek White or Drew Holiday. They were doing a pretty good job of challenging Tyler, but you know what? He just said, you know what? If you're going to give me that space or you're not going to give me that space, I'll just create it by taking these shots from, launching them from deep. And it worked. And, maybe you can't rely on that kind of offense necessarily, but you're going to have to find a source of it, because Rozier, for all of his struggles shooting the ball with accuracy, he's still putting pressure on the rim. He still creates opportunities for himself and others. And Miami's desperately lacking that. They're not going to be able to find it anywhere else. So, I mean, I to be honest with you, you can't, if you're going to look to the roster for a boost, you're going to get it from Tyler. Obviously, that means Jimmy, when he does return, and I wouldn't expect him to return before the All-Star break, to be honest with you. You've got 2 games coming up on the 13th and 14th. I just don't think Jimmy's going to be available for either of those, depending on how long his leave of absence is. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, this is just me guessing at this point. But, you brought up Alondas Williams. He's had an incredible scoring run in the G League.
Yeah.
I mean, it just might be him getting some playing time because
Yeah.
right now you've got nobody else. You're not going to find anybody else. Again, there's no trade option. I don't think
Well,
you
we'll
can
talk.
sign anybody.
We'll talk about the signing option because we have a couple questions about that later. But
All right.
Terry Rozier was so important in that first half. The Heat are not in this game. It's not like it was a single digit game at halftime. This game is over if not for Terry Rozier in that first half. He ended up on the night 13 points on 6 for 16 shooting, 6 assists. I thought he was phenomenal in that first half. You mentioned the rim pressure. He was creating all of Miami's offense. No Jimmy Butler in this game. Bam Adebayo sort of in and out. And it was just Terry Rozier's constant pressure. There was no offense in that first half. And then obviously Tyler Hero in the second half. You mentioned the 3-pointers. He had 20 points in the second half, Tyler Hero did. So he was the guy in the second half. You're absolutely right. It's going to be on Tyler, and it's going to be on Jimmy when he is available. It's going to be on those two guys. And this is really tough. And when Rozier goes down and he grabs at that knee, my first thought is, and it's a cold thought, but this was my first thought. I'm just being honest with you. They just gave up a first-round pick for this guy. This was the big swing. And if this is like a major injury, I mean, that could be so – we didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was an Achilles. I didn't know if it was a complete tear of the ACL. Like, we're still going to figure out what it is. But in that moment, I'm just like, what a lousy way for – you don't want to see your investment basically go down like that, And I can only imagine that Pat Riley and Alonzo Mourning were thinking something similar in their seats on the sideline there. So, obviously we want what's best for Terry Rozier. We'll find out what's going on here. But if he does have to miss a significant amount of time, I think you have to figure out what you're going to do with the starting lineup. You're already starting Caleb. I don't know that you start. Maybe you start Haywood for defense. I think so. Yeah, you need some offensive juice, and Haywood just doesn't give you a whole lot of it. So, but I like I said, I just don't know what the other. Like maybe you start Josh. Maybe that's the way.
If he's available.
If he's available. Good point. Yes, that's true.
I mean, we don't know what happened there. A dislocated shoulder is going to take him weeks to recover, so he's not going to be out there anytime soon. It could just be a shoulder strain. Either way, again, I'm not expecting him to play before the All-Star break. He could take this and next week to kind of get better. Hopefully Terry is able to come back because, again, I know
there
that
is
a lot
silver lining, I guess, it is that we have that All-Star break, right?
Yeah,
it gives you some time.
That's basically what you hope for, is that you can get a semblance of health back and still regain some of that mojo that you've shown over the last few games. It's going to be tough carrying into a matchup against the Bucks on Tuesday, and then unfortunately a matchup against the Sixers on Wednesday, the last game before the All-Star break, where Kyle Lowry might be signing up as a member of those 76ers at that point in time too, so he might be taking on his former team. Those are going to be two tough games, but you know what? That's okay. It doesn't matter. I think. Look, I'm not going to go so far as to say losses don't matter, but when you're down with those kinds of players and you're down that number of players, like there's only so much you can do. This isn't about what we saw during the 7-game stretch where the team was just playing poorly, and even when they were healthy, they were still playing poorly. If you're not getting wins and your team is half broken the way they appear they might be over the next handful of games,
the wins and losses aren't the priority right now. And I know Eric Spoelstra will always say we have enough. Sometimes you just don't. I'm sorry, you don't. When it's Boston, Milwaukee, and Philly, you don't have enough. And so what's frustrating is this team just got healthy. We just got healthy. We just got to watch a healthy Heat team, and then you have not just injuries, but seemingly serious injuries happen to two core players of your rotation, and the newest guy in Terry Rozier, who is starting to find his flow, just had his first practice in a Heat uniform the other day. So really tough, really frustrating. I know I'm frustrated. And yeah, you mentioned those games coming up. This was a great chance, not just one measuring stick game on Super Bowl Sunday, but like a whole week of where do we stack up in the Eastern Conference? And now it's going to be really hard to kind of get that conclusion, to kind of gauge where you're at because of all the things that we're talking about here. But I think there are some options maybe on the buyout market. Can the Miami Heat address their guard depth issue? Can they find a replacement for Terry Rozier in free agency? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan Motors. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? If you ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue, I've talked about it before. I drive it. It's perfect for city drives and also for just getting away, getting a great escape somewhere. Class exclusive Google built-in is always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. And you don't have to connect your phone anymore. They've got Google Maps, Google Play Store. It's all built in to the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. It looks great. It feels great. It's got a lot of kick to it. I love the car. But if you're looking for something a little different, well, then you might want to try the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It's got room for up to 8 and expansive cargo capacity and advanced available 4x4 capability, 284 horsepower. That car can really push it. And of course, there's always the 2024 Nissan Armada, a little big, but you know what? If you're looking for a full-size SUV, that's the best option you're going to be able to find. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions after the game on Twitter using that hashtag AskLOHeat. You can reach us, of course, as always, lockedonheat@gmail.com. Find us Locked On Heat on Instagram. This question comes from K-Bop, who writes in, this game right here proves why I don't think they trade Tyler Hero. Clutch. Also, who should we pick up on the waiver wire for at guard if Terry Rozier and Josh Richardson are going to miss an extended time? Let's talk about the Tyler Hero thing first. I don't necessarily know that we need to talk about this is why you don't trade him, but this is why he is essential. You made such a great point earlier, and I want to underscore it here. Boston's defense is so good. They're so long. There's so many. They're so active. They switch everything. They flatten you out. And when that happens, you just need a guy who's going to pull up from deep and make some shots, or at least take the shots. And I think that's an underrated part of. I know people have an issue with Tyler Hero's shot selection at times, but this afternoon it was required for all the reasons that you laid out. Like there was no quarter given by Boston's defense. You had to have somebody, and I don't know that Tyler Hero is their best offensive player. I still think that that's probably Jimmy Butler when he's engaged, but Adebayo has the ability to get to the basket that Tyler doesn't, like all these things, but he is the one guy who could just sort of give him the ball at half court and he could just pull up and make something happen out of nothing. He does that better than anybody else on Miami. And that is why he's essential, even in a way that Duncan Robinson can't really do it. Duncan Robinson's more of a off the catch. I can do this. I can attack closeouts to get to the basket with a layup, but he's not really doing the things that Tyler was doing in this second half. And that's again, it's why he is essential to this team.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat hyperbolic, but you can criticize Tyler for that shot selection, but at the same time, you've got a top 75 player in Dame Lillard who is kind of known for those same shots, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's what he's built a Hall of Fame career off of, and so it's all about kind of finding the right balance to incorporate that offense. And Tyler, he just doesn't have the same usage as a Lillard type player. Maybe that's the next step for him, is to be able to just put up those shots, and maybe we'll see that over the next handful of games and recognize, you know what, give the ball to Tyler, let him cook, and maybe that's what drives you.
That is what the Heat have hoped that Tyler Hero could turn into, is that kind of player. Now remains to be seen if he'll be that. But I thought tonight it was good. Like I thought he did show restraint for most of that game when Terry Rozier was out there and other things were working. He's playing that pick and roll game. He's doing the off the catch stuff that Eric Spoelstra wants him to do. But when Bleep hit the fan and the Heat had nothing else to do, he was like, all right, I'm just gonna do my thing. And everybody's like, yeah, please, because we need somebody to do something.
Right. Nobody else was going to step up and take that shot. And they just weren't allowing open looks. Like you had to really work and fight through screens and everything else. And they do a really good job defensively. And then the length of Kristaps Porzingis, it's murder. Really, it really takes away a lot of the impact of what Bam Adebayo can do out there. So, that's not to skirt or skirt any criticism on Bam Adebayo, but I think Tyler just recognized, what, we're down. We need some scoring. I'm your best option. And he went to work, and it worked for Miami, ultimately falling short. But still, I think he was a really good spark there. So I'm curious to see. I agree with the question, the original question. I think it kind of shows, if not necessarily why they can't trade him, because nobody is untradeable with the exception of maybe Jimmy Butler. Other than that, I don't think anybody's really untradeable. I think it kind of shows what Miami is hoping for and why they've been reluctant to make that investment of trading Tyler for just any player. It's not going to just be for a role player. It's not going to be just even for complementary role players, because they see their ceiling as being higher when they have Tyler Hero playing the version of this game that he can on a regular basis. So I think it kind of shows the impact. And I think, look, again, I mean, Miami they lost by 4 at home, sure, to a tough, very good Celtics team. And they were without key players as a result. Like, I think that shows you that Miami is still so dangerous. And look, if Jimmy Butler had been there, I'm sure he would have scored more than 4 points. It probably would have been just enough for them to be able to knock off the Celtics. And I think that's what the vision for the front offices is, where they say, we have enough. It's not hyperbolic. They really believe that they do have enough on this roster.
Before we touch on the Terry Rozier replacement options, you already mentioned Bam Adebayo, so we had got a question about Bam, so let's just go to that, and then we'll come back to the Rozier replacement stuff. Barista number 22 writes in, Bam Adebayo shot selection. That's the whole question. I think that's just that's a prompt. That's lobbing it up. Let's talk about Bam Adebayo shot selection. I saw a lot of complaints about it. I get it. It wasn't an efficient night for Bam Adebayo overall. I don't know the problem with his shot selection necessarily. I think we have to give credit to Boston's defense. You mentioned Kristaps Porzingis. He made it really tough on Bam with that length. There just wasn't opportunities for him to get to the spots that he wanted to get to. That said, he missed, and I'm looking at the shot chart right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots in the restricted area. So he was bothered. And a lot of that goes to Horford and Porzingis. But I don't know that the shot selection by itself was that bad. There were definitely some desperation shots. But again, that's because of Boston's defense creating those desperation situations for Miami.
Yeah. I mean, he had a couple that should have fallen. He also took some shots that maybe he might not normally make. Like, he had a couple off the glass that went through. And again, that was a way of countering that height. It's like, you know what? You're going to send this big at me. It's going to be really difficult for me to get that shot. So I have to, put it high off the glass. And those shots were able to fall. So I don't mind
crazy,
the shot
like
selection.
Turnaround jumper off the glass. Like, late in the game. Late in the game, late in the shot clock.
Yeah, it was a tough shot, and he made it. So I don't have a problem necessarily. He also had 8 trips to the line. And, if we're going to kind of pivot and talk about Tyler again, like, he did not get to the line nearly enough. That's been an ongoing problem for him, and it continues to be one. But I think with Bam, he still was able to get to the line. 22 points against a tough defense and those 2 bigs. I think he would still look at that production and be okay with it. And I am too. I think that you got a lot out of Bam, which isn't to say that he can't give more. Like that possession against Jaylen Brown, I think that was unfortunate, a kind of a precursor to the foul on Duncan. I think when he was kind of he was posting up Jaylen Brown, and Brown, using his strength and his length, he was able to poke the ball free, couldn't let Bam get into his comfort zone. Not that he's got much of a comfort zone. He is not a
but it was great defense by Jaylen. It was great defense by Jaylen Brown. I mean, it really was.
But it kind of showed Bam and his limited offensive repertoire at times there. But you know what? The turnaround, the jumper was falling. I thought he was okay from the mid-range game. I don't have a problem necessarily with his offense.
I would have liked him instead of the layups and stuff. And look, obviously, I'm not Bam Adebayo in those situations. I want to just go for the dunk sometimes.
Right.
Easier said than done, right? When you know what I mean? But there were times during the game I was like, just dunk it. But I also don't have a 7'2" center trying to block my shot and keep me away from the basket while I'm drinking my beer on Super Bowl Sunday, from a bar stool. So a couple waiver wire buyout options here for Terry Rozier. So quick recap. We did talk about buyout options after the trade deadline. Now, obviously, we have some different factors at play here with Terry Rozier's injury and Josh Richardson's injury. And so the Heat have a $5 million mid-level exception that they can use. They also can just sign somebody to a veteran minimum salary. So they have a couple of options to go. They could do so without going into that next tax apron. So I thought they were always going to be a player on the buyout market. I think they're going to look. I don't know that they're definitely going to sign somebody, but I didn't know that they were going to definitely sign somebody before. I would imagine that they're going to consider it even more now, depending on these injuries. So that said, I think you obviously have to look at the backcourt. We've talked about guys like Danilo Gallinari potentially and things like that, and they could still circle those wagons if they want. But because of these injuries, the preference might now be for the backcourt. So a couple of guys we mentioned last week, Killian Hayes. I'd still take the flyer on him, but I kind of liked him as like a buy low now development project for maybe next year.
Right.
That's not really the game that's not really the situation that Miami is in right now. If they sign somebody, they probably need that player to play. Probably not start, but at least get some minutes.
Yep.
But Hayes has played for Detroit, not super well, but at least he's warm, right? He's played. Malachi Flynn is a guy that people are monitoring. I don't know if he's going to get bought out or not after getting traded at the deadline, but we could see about that. Shake Milton, another guy that got traded. We'll see what Detroit does with him. If they buy him out, he's sort of like that microwave scorer kind of guy. He was like a couple years ago. It's not been a good year for him now, but again, we're talking about guys who are free agents for a reason. Corey Joseph, Patty Mills, retread, same old vets. I don't know that that's necessarily where I would go, and if I'm Miami, but they're out there. Those are options. My point is, these are sort of the names, David. Like, there's not like we could talk about the John Walls and all that stuff. Like John Wall, that's not happening. These are the names. These are the names.
Yeah, they're not great. It's why I don't think that they might not even focus on adding a player like that. Like I know we're kind of assuming that that's what you need to do, but they might just go in-house. They might just look to Alondas and say, you know what, you're our scorer now. You're the guy who's going to provide that boost there. And I know he's not a point guard or anything like that, but I think you've kind of handled point guard by committee all season long, and you weren't getting much production out of Kyle Lowry, which is why you were willing to trade him. So of those names, like I don't think any of them really stand out. I could see, no, seriously, I could see Patty Mills being the guy that you're looking to, great Spurs player, championship pedigree. He knows what to do. Always a 3-point threat, etc. Maybe you can look to, dip him in the fountain of youth, the way that you have for Kevin Love too. So that might be the one hope there. Other than that, Killian Hayes, he's too wildly inefficient and too small and undersized. Like, for Terry Rozier's, all of his weaknesses and his inefficiency scoring, which weren't evident until he joined the Miami Heat, obviously.
Right.
He's still a playmaker and he's still an above average defender. Killian Hayes is neither
an athlete. And an athlete. Right. He's an awesome he's a top 5% athlete. Killian Hayes is not an athlete.
No, he's undersized. He's fine as a potential scorer, and he has his moments there. But you're not banking on him having 1 out of every 10 games and be like, oh, yeah, he put up 18 points. That's awesome. Right, I'm glad we brought him aboard. You're looking for something a little bit more consistent. I just don't know that you're going to get it from any of those names that you mentioned or any of the other options that might be available.
Yeah, I think if anything, you're adding somebody for literally depth, just in case there's one more injury, and you're like, well, we need somebody to dribble the basketball. And but I think you're right. Like, great timing for Alondas Williams to get this call up. I would imagine we're gonna see him.
What probably. About Jamari? You can't add Jamari at this point, right?
Jamari Bouye would be well. You could sign him to a standard contract. I mean, you have the open roster spot if you want it. I don't know that they're going to go that route, but hey, maybe maybe you bring Alondas Williams up to a standard deal, and then you fill in Bouye. I think it's a good name. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
I mean, of those options there, which do you have a preference?
Nope.
If you had to choose between Bouye and the way he's playing for Sioux Falls and Killian Hayes or anybody else, like, who would you pick?
I just bring him into a workout, let him play one-on-one, and whoever wins gets the job. Honestly, that's where I'm at. Like, if Malachi Flynn got bought out, that would be something interesting to me. Shake Milton, I've always sort of liked him. If he does end up getting bought out, like something like that. But we'll see. But we're running out of time. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Enjoy the Super Bowl, everybody. We'll be back later this week.